For 9 summers, my family left me behind. Then they came back expecting me to save them. Nora Bellamy stood behind the front desk of Harbor Lighthouse, smiling at 200 guests while calculating how fast she could disappear. The seaside hotel had never looked better. Every room was booked, lanterns glowed along the veranda, and donors were waiting for me to announce our plan to restore the lighthouse across the bay. At midnight, an investor was supposed to sign the agreement funding Harbor Light's first expansion. I should have felt safe. Instead, I carried an emergency list in my jacket pocket. Payroll first vendors, second sell the van, close the West Wing drive south before anyone asked where I had gone. I had built a life people admired, but part of me was still the 8-year-old girl who kept her suitcase near the door. I had just raised my glass when the entrance opened. My mother walked in first. Elise Bellamy wore a cream coat, and the calm expression she used whenever she wanted strangers to believe she was reasonable. My legal father, Grant, followed her. Behind them came my brother Lucas and an attorney carrying a black case. I had not seen them in 13 years. Lucas waited until guests turned toward us. Then he placed a folder on the marble counter. "We need to settle Briar Glen before this becomes a criminal matter," he said. He did not shout. He did not need to. Conversation softened across the lobby. My mother's eyes traveled over Harbor Light's staircase and dining room. She looked less surprised than offended, as if I had built everything with something belonging to her. We moved into my office, but the damage had begun. People had heard Briar Glen and criminal. That was the point. Inside the folder were contracts carrying my name record showing $2.4 million missing from a Bellamy Heart Restoration Fund, and a medical statement claiming June Hart had suffered cognitive decline before leaving Briar Glen Lodge to me. Their attorney slid a settlement across my desk. If I transferred Briar Glen to Bellamy Heart, abandoned every claim connected to June's estate, and allowed the company to describe the missing money as my management error, they would withdraw their civil complaint, stop supplying documents to the bank, and tell investigators the dispute had been resolved internally. They could not promise I would never be charged. They were only promising to stop helping it happen. The deadline was midnight. Bellamy Heart faced a credit review the next morning, and the bank wanted Briar Glen as collateral. Without it, thousands of employees might miss paychecks. My mother named them allowed housekeepers, cooks, maintenance workers. She had always been skilled at placing innocent people behind the things she wanted from me. I examined the contract they claimed I had signed. The signature resembled mine, but only the version I used at 17, the oversized N, the low final stroke, even the tiny break where my pen had caught on cheap paper. I had changed my signature after discovering my family had used my identity on a business loan. That old version existed in one place, the summer employment records at Briar Glen. "Who removed my files from the archive?" I asked. Lucas answered immediately. "I haven't been there in years." Too quickly. After they left my office, I opened the safe beneath my desk. Inside was a brass key engraved with the number 9 sent by June before she died. Her note contained one sentence: "Use this when they put your name on something you did not do." I returned to the lobby with the key in my palm. "I won't sign tonight," I said. My mother glanced toward the donors and staff. "Are you really willing to risk all of them for an old mountain lodge?" I looked at Lucas. "If Briar Glen is only an old lodge, why did all 3 of you cross the country to take it from me?" And the first time my family left me at Briar Glen, I was 8 years old, and still believed adults only said temporary when they meant it. Lucas had qualified for a junior golf tournament in California. My father called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, although opportunities seemed to happen to Lucas every few months. My mother packed his clubs herself, wrapping the heads into towels as carefully as if they were breakable bones. She packed my clothes into a small red suitcase. "You'll spend a few weeks with Aunt June," she told me. "You're always the adaptable one. Lucas needs us more right now." It sounded like praise because she smiled when she said it. I did not understand that adaptable was the word my family used when they wanted something from me without having to ask. Briar Glen Lodge sat in the mountains of West Virginia, 3 hours from the nearest airport, and 20 minutes from a town with one grocery store. The building had gray stone walls, green shutters, and a brass bell on the front desk that June refused to let children ring without purpose. My parents stayed long enough for lunch. When their car disappeared down the gravel road, I carried my suitcase to the lobby and placed it beside the door. June watched me from behind the desk. They said they might come back early. I explained. She did not tell me they would not. Instead, she moved a wooden chair beside the front window so I could wait without standing. For the first 2 weeks, I sat there every Friday afternoon. Each time headlights appeared between the trees, I lifted my head. Each time the car belonged to a guest, I pretended I had only been looking outside. My parents returned during the final week of August. Lucas wore a tournament jacket and talked about the Pacific Ocean all the way home. No one asked what I had done while they were gone. The next June, my red suitcase appeared beside the stairs again. That was how 9 summers began. Every year followed the same structure. Lucas traveled to tournaments, company resorts, and invitation-only training camps. My parents went with him because his future, they said, required constant attention. I went to Briar Glen because I was easy. At the lodge, my name was written in the guest ledger under long-term stay. Grant Bellamy signed beneath it as if I were a parcel being stored until September. My mother mailed brochures from wherever they were: palm trees in Florida, red cliffs in Arizona, a golf course in Scotland with grass so green it looked painted. On each one, she wrote some version of the same promise. "Next time we'll bring you." I kept the brochures in the bottom drawer of the desk in room 9. At first I saved them because I believed her. Later I saved them because I wanted to know how many times a promise could be repeated before it became evidence. June never called me easy. She gave me work. At 9, I learned to fold fitted sheets, which I still consider one of the darker arts. At 10, she taught me to inspect a room after housekeeping finished. A mirror could shine while dust collected behind the frame. A bed could look perfect while one corner of the sheet had come loose. "Clean is what the guest sees," June said. "Ready is what they feel." She taught me that the front desk sold more than keys. It sold certainty. A person arrived, tired, lost, newly married, recently divorced, or carrying news they had not yet told anyone. Our job was to make sure the room did not add another problem. By 12, I could check in guests, balance the cash drawer, and tell the difference between anger and fear. Angry people wanted to be heard. Frightened people wanted to know someone had a plan. June always asked before giving me one. Room 9 was in the attic beneath the eastern slope of the roof. It had a narrow bed, a writing desk, and a window overlooking the apple trees. The lock was old brass, and the key had a large number 9 engraved across the bow. At the end of my first summer, I tried to return it. June closed my fingers around the key. "You don't return the key to a place that still has room for you," she said. I carried it home every August. My parents never noticed. The summer I turned 12, I found the photograph. I was looking for invoice paper in June's office when an envelope slipped from a drawer. Inside was a picture of 3 young people standing on the Briar Glen porch. June was on the left. My mother stood on the right, younger than I had ever imagined her. Between them was a man with dark hair, a crooked smile, and my eyes. Not eyes similar to mine, my eyes. On the back, someone had written, "Caleb June Elise, summer 1993. When June saw the photograph in my hand, she became completely still. "Who is he?" I asked. "Caleb Hart." "Was he family?" Her answer came slowly. "He belonged to this family." She took the picture, but did not put it away immediately. Her thumb rested over his face. "He died before you were born," she said. That night, I heard June arguing on the office telephone. The lodge was quiet, and sound traveled through the heating vents. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard my father's name. She carries Bellamy on paper. June said, "But that does not give you the right to erase the rest of her." I stopped. There was a pause while Grant spoke. Then June said, "If she learns the truth, Lucas is no longer the only heir." A floorboard moved beneath my foot. June looked toward the doorway and saw me. She ended the call. I asked what heir meant and why Lucas was one. June sat beside me on the stairs. "Sometimes adults build an entire house around a secret," she said. "Then they call the house a family, because admitting what it really is would require them to tear down the walls." It was not an answer. I knew that even then. But June looked afraid, and I had been trained to make fear easier for adults. I told her I was tired and went upstairs. During the school year, Lucas remained the center of our family's architecture. His trophies filled the living room. His tournament calendar controlled birthdays, holidays, and medical appointments. I wrote thank you letters to sponsors because my handwriting was better. I organized travel folders because my mother said Lucas needed a focus. When I was 14, money disappeared from my college account to pay for a private coach. My father called it reallocating resources. My mother explained that families invested where the opportunity was greatest. Lucas was an investment. I was infrastructure. The summer I turned 17, June let me manage the evening shift at Briar Glen. I assigned rooms, handled complaints, approved small refunds, and closed the register. For 4 hours each night, people asked me questions and waited for my answer. That fall, I applied to a hospitality management program in Oregon. It included tuition assistance and paid training at partner hotels. The final interview fell on the same weekend as Lucas's national qualifier. My mother told me to reschedule. She needed me to manage sponsored dinners and transportation. "I'm going to the interview," I said. Her face changed not into anger but disbelief. I went. 3 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. My parents opened it before I came home. My father placed it on the kitchen table and said the program was too far away. The family needed me while Lucas moved into professional competition. "You applied without discussing it with us," he said. "You used my college money without discussing it with me." That was different. Because it was for Lucas, because it was for the family. A few days later, searching for my birth certificate, I found a credit file in his desk. My social security number appeared on a business loan as a secondary guarantor. I asked him what it meant. "It's temporary," he said. "It won't affect you." "Why didn't you ask me?" His expression hardened. Families do not need permission slips for every decision. That sentence ended my childhood more cleanly than graduation ever could. I did not leave in anger. Anger is loud, and my family knew how to wait until loud things exhausted themselves. I left with a plan. Over the next 9 months, I froze my credit, opened an account at another bank, copied every document carrying my name, and saved money from weekend shifts. I applied for jobs along the Oregon coast and rented a room through a friend's older sister. After graduation, I boarded a bus with $3,800, a backpack, June's operations notebook, the key to room 9, and a sealed letter she had given me that spring. I opened the letter somewhere in Nebraska. "Don't leave because you believe you have nowhere to belong," she had written. "Leave because for the first time you are allowed to choose the place." I started in Oregon, cleaning rooms at a highway hotel. Then I worked night reception, supervised housekeeping, assisted with revenue reports, and managed a failing inn whose owner considered maintenance a personal insult. At night I studied accounting. 8 years later, I bought a weathered seaside boarding house scheduled for demolition. I renamed it Harbor Light House. I built it around everything June had taught me and everything my family had not. Managers took pay cuts before hourly workers. No employee's name went on a document without consent. We kept one room available for emergencies even during tourist season. Harbor Light succeeded. I did not learn to feel safe. When the boiler failed, I stayed awake repairing it instead of calling for help. During slow months, I reduced my own salary without telling anyone. I kept an updated escape plan in my desk. Success gave me property. It did not give me permanence. June died when I was 29. Her will left Briar Glen to me. My family barely objected. They called it an aging lodge with expensive repairs and little strategic value. I hired local management and kept it open, but I rarely visited. Briar Glen was the first place I had belonged and the place that proved I had been left behind. After the funeral, Maggie Doyle sent me the brass key I already owned and a final note from June. Keep it until someone uses your name to lock you inside a story that is not yours. I placed the key in Harbor Light's safe. 2 years later, my family crossed the country, brought me a confession they had written in my name, and asked me to save them with the only property June had ever trusted me to protect. The article went live at 6:12 the next morning. I know the exact time because I was standing in Harbor Light's kitchen pouring coffee for the breakfast crew when every phone on the counter began to vibrate. The headline did not accuse me directly. It asked whether the owner of Harbor Light House had manipulated an elderly woman to obtain a valuable lodge. Questions are useful that way. They let a publisher plant an answer while pretending to remain neutral. Beneath the headline were copies of the old signature June's supposed medical report and a chart showing $2.4 million, moving from a Bellamy Heart Restoration Fund into something called N. Reed Restoration. The article noted that Harbor Light had recently completed expensive repairs. It never said the two businesses were the same. It only placed their names close enough for readers to do the work themselves. By 7, our expansion lender had paused its review. By 8, the Lighthouse Foundation had asked me to step aside temporarily. At 9, the first wedding party canceled. At 10, Ruth brought me a printed list of 14 more cancellations and placed it beside my untouched breakfast. "How long can we carry payroll?" she asked. 6 weeks, I said. It was closer to 4. Ruth had managed Harbor Light's front desk longer than I had owned it. She was 62, wore silver reading glasses on a chain, and could make an angry guest apologize for raising his voice without ever raising hers. She looked at me long enough to show she knew I was lying. At noon, my mother called. "This can still be contained," Elise said. "You supplied the documents." I said it can be contained. I didn't say it happened by itself. Her calm was almost impressive. If I signed the settlement by 5, Bellamy Hart would issue a statement calling the matter an internal accounting dispute. Their civil filing would be withdrawn. The anonymous source would stop speaking. The company would tell the bank that no intentional misuse had occurred. "You created the fire," I said, "and now you're selling me the extinguisher. I am giving you away to protect your employees." There it was again. Innocent people positioned between my mother and the thing she wanted. After we hung up, I locked my office door and pulled an old suitcase from the storage closet. I had not used it in years. It was not the red suitcase from Briar Glen, but the motion was the same. Fold shirts, choose documents, count cash, leave before the story hardened around me. I opened a map on my computer and searched for small hotels for sale in towns where no one knew my name. Ruth entered without knocking. She saw the suitcase, the passport, and the spreadsheet where I had calculated what Harbor Light might bring in an emergency sale. She did not ask whether I was leaving. "The staff needs to know what to prepare for," she said. "We don't need you pretending you aren't scared. I'm trying to protect them. From what facts or the discomfort of watching you need something." The question landed harder than anything my mother had said. All my life, silence had been presented as a kindness. I had believed that if I carried fear alone, no one else would have to pay for it. But the people downstairs were already paying. They just had less information than I did. I unpacked the suitcase. That afternoon, I gathered the department heads in the dining room. I told them the accusations, the deadline my family had imposed, the fact that I had almost sold the hotel without warning them, and the truth about our cash reserves. I did not ask for loyalty. I told them they were free to leave, speak to attorneys, or demand written protections before helping me. Our sales manager resigned the next morning. He had 2 children and a mortgage. He said he believed me but could not risk waiting for proof. I hated losing him. I also understood. The others stayed for different reasons. Ruth trusted me. The chef needed the insurance. Our maintenance supervisor wanted every instruction documented. None of those reasons was less honorable than another. I called Maggie Doyle. She answered on the first ring. "They used my name," I said. Maggie was silent for half a second. "Bring the key," she said. Briar Glen looked smaller when I returned. The mountain road was lined with bare trees, and the stone lodge seemed to lean into the cold. I had attended June's funeral there, but grief had made the rooms indistinct. This time, every detail returned: the brass bell, the ledger, the faint scent of cedar from the old closets. Maggie met me in the lobby carrying a leather document case. "June left instructions," she said. "I was not permitted to open the sealed materials unless a transfer of Briar Glen was demanded or your signature was disputed. Both conditions have now occurred. You knew there were materials. I knew there was a container. I did not know what was in it." Room 9 was exactly as I remembered, except for fresh paint around the window. My old desk remained beneath the eaves. The brass key opened the room, but nothing else appeared unusual. Maggie handed me June's written instruction. "Find the lock beneath the place where she learned to keep the books." We removed the bottom drawer of the desk. Behind it was a narrow brass plate covered by dust. The key turned once. A section of paneling released. Inside was a fireproof compartment containing 3 binders, a metal box, and a stack of letters tied with blue ribbon. The first document carried the name Caleb Hart. He had signed a formal acknowledgement of paternity 7 months before I was born. The second document was a letter to my mother. Caleb wrote that he intended to marry her after returning from a hotel project in Colorado. He died on that trip when a company vehicle went through a guardrail. The third was an agreement signed by June Elise Grant and Edwin Hart, Caleb's father. Grant knew before he married my mother that I was not his biological child. In exchange for publicly accepting me as a Bellamy, he received voting authority over the portion of Hart Hotels reserved for Caleb's direct descendant while I was a minor. My mother's marriage helped complete the merger between Hart Hotels and Bellamy Resorts. Grant gained the brand, the properties, and control of shares that should eventually have passed to me. Lucas was presented as the future of the combined company. I was entered in private records as a beneficiary whose identity would remain sealed. Why, I asked, though the papers answered. Maggie turned another page. The trust protected the company from instability while I was a child, but it also required disclosure when I reached 21. The disclosure never occurred. Grant continued voting the shares through extensions approved by trustees connected to Bellamy Hart. June had challenged the arrangement repeatedly. The letters showed years of negotiation. She threatened to petition for recognition of my inheritance. My parents threatened to cut off all contact between us. Edwin Hart, already ill, negotiated a compromise. June would remain silent while I was a minor. In return, she would receive guaranteed time with me every summer, access to my educational records, and custody of documents belonging to Caleb's branch of the family. 9 summers. I sat on the floor beside the open compartment. For me, those summers had meant being left behind. For June, they had been the only part of my childhood she was allowed to hold. For my parents, they had been the price of keeping her quiet. The discovery did not heal anything. It made the wound more precise. June had loved me. She had also watched me return to that house every September without telling me why I felt like a guest there. Her letters admitted it. I told myself 9 summers were better than none she had written. I was wrong to confuse what I could obtain with what you deserved. I cried then, but not neatly. I was angry with the dead, which is a useless kind of anger, because it cannot change the expression on the other person's face. Maggie waited without touching me. When I could read again, we examined the trust. It did not make me owner of Bellamy Hart overnight. It gave Caleb's direct beneficiary a protected voting interest that activated under specific conditions: an attempted transfer of Hart property, a dispute involving beneficiary identity, misuse of the beneficiary's signature, or conduct by trustees against the beneficiary's interests. My family's effort to take Briar Glen had triggered all four. I could demand a special board meeting, suspend transactions involving hard assets, and require an independent review. Then I can stop them, I said. You can force them to answer, Maggie corrected. That is not the same thing. She pointed to the article on my phone. These records establish who you are. They do not establish that you did not take the money. If you reveal the inheritance without disproving the fraud claim, they will say you are using bloodline to escape an audit. Two separate battles. The first gave me a chair in the room. The second would determine whether anyone believed what I said from it. Back in Oregon, I told HarborLight's senior staff everything, including the part about Caleb and June. Speaking the truth aloud made it sound less like my life and more like a lawsuit written by someone with poor restraint. No one applauded. I was grateful. Ruth asked what we could prove. Not enough yet, I said. That was when we hired Owen Price. Owen was a forensic accountant with the posture of a man permanently disappointed by spreadsheets. He listened without reacting, then pushed the family history aside. We are not investigating whether your relatives are terrible, he said. Terrible is not an accounting category. We are determining which documents survive when no one is required to trust you. His first question concerned the signature. The question document was sent to an examiner alongside verified samples from the previous 15 years. The result came back within 3 days. My supposed signature had not been written on the contract. It had been copied from an internship form I signed at Briar Glen when I was 17. The enlarged N, the low final stroke, and even a tiny interruption caused by a damaged pen appeared identically on 4 separate pages. A human hand does not repeat microscopic defects in the same position. Someone had scanned the old form and placed the image into the contract. That proved the signature was false. It did not prove who used it. The medical report collapsed next. The doctor who claimed June had shown cognitive decline had never treated her. Her actual cardiologist and primary physician both documented full decision-making capacity when she signed the will. The doctor named in the false report had received consulting payments from Bellamy Hart 6 months earlier. The foundation of their story was weakening, but Owen refused to celebrate. Bad paper is not the same as a known author, he said. We needed to connect the fabrication to someone. Lucas had insisted he had not visited HarborLight before the fundraiser. Our main camera system offered nothing. 3 weeks of footage had vanished during what the vendor log called an unscheduled restart. Then, our insurance agent reminded us of a separate hallway camera installed after a guest broke into the office the previous year. It stored video on the insurer's server, not ours. At 11:43 on a Tuesday night, Lucas appeared on the recording. He entered using a badge assigned to a former employee. He wore a baseball cap low over his face, but he looked directly at the camera while checking the hallway. The image was clear. He unlocked my office, inserted a flash drive into my computer, opened the filing cabinet, placed invoices inside photographed documents, and removed several sheets of HarborLight letterhead. He stayed 19 minutes. The server log established the video had not been altered. When I watched it, I expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt sick. Lucas had stood in the room where I kept employee emergency contacts and payroll records. He had moved through HarborLight as if my life were another course laid out for his advantage. Owen froze the image of the flash drive. Now we have access, he said. We still need purpose. The money supplied it. The recipient listed in the article was not connected to HarborLight. Its full legal name was North Reed Restoration. Someone had shortened it to N. Reed Restoration in every summary given to reporters and lenders. The company had been formed by a former property manager who worked for Lucas. Owen traced the transfers in stages. Money left the Bellamy Hart Restoration Fund, entered North Reed, split into smaller payments, and moved through 2 investment entities. The final destinations included a private aircraft account, a Miami condominium, Lucas's personal debt, and an unapproved resort development in Nevada. Not $1 entered HarborLight. My name appeared only in documents created after the transfers had already occurred. By then we could show the accusation was false and that Lucas had planted evidence. What we could not yet prove was whether he acted alone. The answer came from Bellamy Hart's own compliance rules. Because the company operated properties across several states and carried regulated investment debt, executive video meetings were automatically archived. A meeting involving my mother, Lucas Grant, and corporate counsel had been deleted from the active directory. Owen found its identifier in a backup index requested by the external auditor. The restored recording lasted 27 minutes. Lucas proposed attaching my name to the restoration loss. My mother said they did not need to prove I stole the money. They needed the bank to believe I was unreliable long enough to obtain Briar Glen. Lucas asked what happened after I signed. "We withdraw the civil claim," Elise said. "By then the collateral is ours." Grant objected to involving law enforcement. For one hopeful second, I thought he had drawn a line. Then he explained that a criminal investigation could expose the underlying transactions and damage the company. He was not protecting me. He was protecting the method. "If Nora is not frightened," my mother said, "she will not cooperate." No one in the meeting challenged the use of my signature. When the recording ended, Owen closed the laptop. "And this is the part that survives disbelief," he said. The supporting evidence closed the remaining exits. The files placed on my office computer carried creation dates from 2 years earlier, but their internal records told a different story. They had been produced on Lucas's personal laptop 48 hours before his visit to Harbor Light. The system clock had been moved backward before export, then restored afterward. One document still contained the username Luke PNGA, the account Lucas had used since college. The former Briar Glen employee quoted in the article was named Samuel Pike. He had worked maintenance for 6 months before June dismissed him for stealing guest deposits. Samuel initially refused to speak with us. Then, Owen found a payment from Northreed Restoration to a landscaping company owned by Samuel's brother. Through his attorney, Samuel surrendered his messages with Lucas. "Just say she forgot appointments and signed whatever Nora placed in front of her," Lucas had written. "Nobody is going to examine an old woman's calendar." Samuel had never seen me place a document before June. He had not been inside Briar Glen during the year the will was signed. His statement would not carry the case, but it showed how the public story had been assembled. A true name, a false memory, and money hidden behind a relative. The more evidence we found, the less comfort I felt. I had spent years imagining Grant as weak rather than deliberate. That distinction had allowed me to preserve one softer corner of my childhood. The trust agreements and meeting recording removed it. He had signed extensions after I turned 21. He had accepted bonuses tied to votes cast with Caleb's shares. He had watched Elise and Lucas construct the accusation and objected only when their plan threatened the company he controlled. His silence had never been empty. It had produced signatures, money, and permission. That night, I called Maggie from Harbor Light's empty dining room. "Did June know he kept using the shares?" I asked. "She suspected it," Maggie said. "She lacked records the trustees were required to provide." "Why didn't she tell me anyway?" "Because she feared your parents would make you choose between a truth you could not yet enforce and the only family you knew." She chose delay. She knew it might be the wrong choice. Love did not make June infallible. Fear had shaped her decisions too. The difference was that she had left me evidence capable of contradicting her mistakes. My parents had left documents designed to make their choices look inevitable, generous, and clean to everyone watching from outside. Before we could call the special board meeting, my family made one final offer. They would recognize me publicly as Caleb Hart's daughter. I could keep Harbor Light, receive a board seat, and accept a private compensation fund. Lucas would withdraw every accusation. In return, I had to keep the recording confidential and authorize Briar Glen as collateral. My mother called it a path that protected everyone. It protected the people who had created the danger. Everyone else was simply the language she wrapped around them. I declined through counsel. Then, I prepared for Briar Glen. I prepared the trust records, the signature analysis, the video, the money trail, and the recording. I also prepared an emergency operating plan for Bellamy Hart, because my mother was right about one thing: thousands of employees had not created this crisis. I did not write a speech about revenge. I wrote a list of decisions: who needed to be removed immediately, who could remain while cooperating, which contracts had to be frozen, which records had to be preserved, which evidence belonged with regulators and prosecutors instead of in a family settlement. For most of my life, my family had assigned consequences downward. Lucas made the mistake, Nora adjusted. The company took the risk, employees absorbed the loss. My parents protected the story, and everyone else lived inside it. At Briar Glen, I intended to send every consequence back to its correct address. The special meeting began at Briar Glen on a Thursday morning in February. By 9, the ballroom held board members, bank representatives, outside auditors, attorneys, state regulators, and 4 employees selected by their co-workers. Reporters waited in the lobby until the confidential records could be entered. My mother arrived in navy wool and pearls. Lucas wore the gray suit from the photograph in the article. Grant came last and took a chair near the end of the table. I went upstairs before anyone saw me. Room 9 smelled of fresh paint and cold wood. I locked the door, checked the window, checked my car keys, and calculated how quickly I could reach the service stairs. My hands would not stop shaking. Maggie stood outside the room without knocking. "Do you want me to begin without you?" she asked through the door. No one in my childhood had asked whether a family decision should proceed without me. The question steadied me more than an order would have. "No," I said. "But thank you for asking." I put the brass key around my neck and went downstairs. Maggie opened with Caleb's acknowledgement of paternity, the trust in the agreement signed by Grant and Elise. She did not describe me as a lost heiress returning to claim an empire. She described a beneficiary whose existence had been concealed from the governance records of a company using her shares. When she asked me to state my name for the minutes, I said, Nora Caleb Hart Bellamy. Bellamy was the name on my birth certificate. Hart was the name withheld from me. Neither one gave anyone permission to use my signature. The trust did not hand me the company. It gave Caleb's branch enough protected votes to suspend transactions involving Briar Glen, demand an independent audit, and call the meeting now in progress. Lucas leaned toward his microphone. Even if this family history is accurate, it does not answer where the $2.4 million went. Nora's bloodline does not make her innocent. "I agree," I said. "Let's talk about the money." The signature examiner went first. She showed the internship form I had signed at 17 beside the 4 disputed documents. The same broken ink mark appeared in every copy. The signatures had been pasted, not written. The doctor named in June's supposed cognitive report had never examined her. Her actual physicians documented full capacity when she signed the will. Lucas called both issues clerical failures. Then, Owen played the hallway video. The room watched Lucas enter Harborlight with a former employee's badge, connect a flash drive to my computer, place invoices in my cabinet, and leave carrying hotel letterhead. Lucas said he had gone there because he already suspected me. The insurer's attorney asked why an innocent investigator would plant papers instead of securing them. Lucas requested a recess. I refused. 3 board members supported him until Owen explained that the next evidence concerned people who had requested the delay. The financial map filled the screen. North Reed Restoration received the missing funds. The money passed through 2 entities and paid for Lucas's aircraft account, Miami Condominium Personal Debt, and Nevada Development. My name appeared only on records generated after the transfers. The bank representative removed her glasses and asked Grant whether the board had authorized any of those payments. Grant said no. Then we played the recording. My mother's voice crossed the ballroom clearly. We do not need to prove Nora stole it. We need the bank to stop trusting her long enough to get Briar Glen. Lucas asked what happened after I transferred the lodge. We withdraw the civil claim, Elise answered. By then the collateral is ours. Grant warned them not to invite police attention because investigators might reach the underlying transactions. If Nora is not frightened, my mother said she will not cooperate. The recording ended. No one moved. Even the heating system seemed to wait. I did not fill the silence. For 13 years, my family had depended on me to make uncomfortable rooms easier. I let this one remain difficult. Grant broke first. He stood without looking at Elise. He admitted that he had known Caleb was my father, accepted authority over Caleb's shares, approved extensions after I turned 21, and remained in the meeting while my signature became part of a threat. I told myself that not creating the documents made me less responsible, he said. I called silence neutral because neutral sounded cleaner than cowardice. It was never neutral. He agreed to surrender records and testify under oath. His confession did not restore a childhood. It did something smaller and more useful. It removed one more place where the truth could be denied. My mother rose next. She did not challenge the recording. She challenged my right to expose it. She said public investigation would destroy Bellamy heart, damage Caleb's legacy, and cost thousands of workers their jobs. She asked whether I wanted to become the woman who destroyed my biological father's company. I did not bring the company here, I said. I placed our emergency plan on the table. And I will not make the people who did not create this crisis pay first. One of the employee observers, a housekeeper named Denise Carter, asked to speak before the board voted. She had worked for Bellamy Hart for 19 years. Her husband was recovering from surgery and health insurance came through the company. She said she did not understand trusts or voting blocks, but she understood what happened when executives called a crisis temporary. Temporary means our schedules get cut first, she said. Then somebody upstairs gets a retention bonus for staying through the mess. No one interrupted her. Denise looked at me. Are you here to take the company apart? Or are you here to run it? It was the honest version of my mother's accusation, stripped of manipulation. Thousands of people did depend on the answer. Exposing my family without a plan would be morally satisfying for one afternoon and brutal for everyone below. Neither, I said. I am here to stop the people who broke it from deciding who pays for the repair. I explained that the trust allowed me to freeze disputed transactions, not crown myself chief executive. A restructuring professional would control operations. Independent directors would review contracts. Employees would have a representative with access to financial reports as the board. Denise asked whether I could guarantee her job. No, I said. The word hurt, but a false promise would have been another form of theft. I can guarantee that executive property is sold before your insurance is cut. I can guarantee notice before closures. I can guarantee that no one receives a bonus for eliminating the wages of people who had no vote in the decision. Denise nodded. That exchange changed the room more than any speech I could have prepared. My mother had used workers as a shield. Denise had arrived as a person with questions risk and the right to hear an answer that was not decorated for her comfort. The bank representative requested a 15-minute recess to review our operating proposal. During it, Elise approached me near the windows. You always wanted to punish us, she whispered. No, listen, I said. I wanted you to ask before deciding what my life was for. She looked confused. That confusion was the proof I still needed that an apology was not waiting beneath her defenses. That was the beginning of the judgment, though no one called it that. I did not stand and announce 5 categories of guilt. The differences appeared in the decisions. Junior communications employees and administrative staff received preservation notices and protection from retaliation. They could keep their jobs if they surrendered instructions, corrected false statements, and cooperated with the audit. Some admitted they had doubted the article materials but feared losing their positions. Yesterday you could say you did not know, I told them. Tomorrow depends on what you do now that you do. The chief financial officer and 2 audit committee members were suspended. They had not created North Reed, but they had ignored payments structured to avoid review. Independent counsel would determine whether bonuses should be recovered and whether regulators should receive professional complaints. I did not declare them criminals. I removed their access to records and money while people with lawful authority decided what followed. Grant resigned as chairman that afternoon. He surrendered voting authority connected to the Hart Trust, agreed to return compensation tied to those votes, and signed a cooperation agreement requiring complete testimony. The company recorded his cooperation but promised no immunity. All personal contact with me would pass through counsel unless I changed that boundary. Elise was removed from the board and every public role. Bellamy Hart stopped paying her private attorneys. The company filed civil claims for defamation, coercion, and breach of fiduciary duty, and asked a court to preserve assets connected to the campaign against me. My mother looked directly at me. "You are doing this to your own mother in front of strangers." "You have counsel," I said. "Speak to them." It was not the answer she wanted because it gave her nothing to perform against. Lucas was dismissed and his voting rights suspended. The company sent the video money trail, altered files, witness messages, and meeting recording to prosecutors and financial investigators. Counsel sought court orders protecting witnesses and restricting his access to company systems and disputed assets. Lucas stared at me across the table. "You want to see your brother in prison?" "I don't decide your sentence," I said. "I'm only done hiding the evidence from it." The board approved an interim operating group composed of a restructuring specialist, 2 independent directors, a bank representative, an employee representative, and me as Caleb's beneficiary. We sold the corporate aircraft and company condominium. We stopped the Nevada project, canceled related party contracts, and cut executive bonuses before touching hourly payroll. 6 months of wages and health coverage were placed in a protected account. Not every job survived. 2 failing resorts were sold, and some positions disappeared. I refused to promise a painless rescue because painless was another word my family used when they meant someone else would absorb the wound. We promised order, notice, severance, and honesty. Harborlight paid a price too. Our expansion died. Some donors never returned. Winter bookings remained weak even after corrections appeared. I used my reserve fund to cover payroll and reduced my salary to almost nothing. The board asked me to fold Harborlight into Bellamy Hart and take an executive title. I refused. Harborlight was not proof that I deserved an inheritance. It was the life I had built without one. I accepted a temporary oversight role in the restructuring and kept my hotel independent. In the months that followed, I read every letter June had sealed in room 9. She admitted she had confused limited access with adequate protection. She feared that revealing the truth while I was a child would cause my parents to cut her out completely. She chose delay and hoped 9 summers could compensate for the rest of the year. They could not! I loved her. I was angry with her. Both truths fit in the same room. Grant sent me a copy of his sworn testimony, then 1 letter each month. He did not ask me to call him Dad. Each letter described one moment when he had remained silent and what that silence allowed. I kept the letters in a box and answered none during the first year. Regret means more when it continues without being rewarded by forgiveness. Elise changed her story rather than her mind. She stopped saying I had stolen money and began saying I had cruelly taken a private family matter public. In her version, the pressure campaign became an awkward attempt to make me communicate. I stopped trying to convince her. Some people do not lack evidence. They lack the ability to survive a story in which they are not the good person. Lucas awaited trial. He wrote that he had also been used, that our parents had made love dependent on his success, and that every failure felt like extinction. I believed him. I also wrote back once, "What they did to you explains why you were afraid to lose everything. It does not answer for the moment you entered my office and decided I should lose it instead." Briar Glen reopened the following spring as a training hotel. Young employees earned wages while studying operations, accounting, maintenance, and guest services. Several rooms were reserved for trainees leaving unsafe homes. We kept room 9 unchanged. Its door carried a small brass plaque. No one has to prove they deserve a room. Harbor Light survived its winter. One night, with every room occupied, the heating system failed. I took out my tools and began removing the access panel alone. Then I stopped. I called the emergency technician. I woke Ruth and told her, "I need help." The words felt less dramatic than leaving and more difficult. A year after the meeting, I stood behind Briar Glen's front desk on reopening day. The lobby walls no longer displayed portraits of chairmen. They carried the names of housekeepers, cooks, gardeners, desk clerks, and maintenance workers who had kept the lodge alive. June's name was among them. The brass key to room 9 rested in a glass case beside the guest ledger. A plaque beneath it read, "This key once opened a room for a child who had been left behind. Now it opens a place for people beginning again." Near sunset, a new trainee entered carrying a battered suitcase. She tried to hide it behind her leg while pretending she did not need assistance. I recognized the posture. I did not take the suitcase from her. I did not tell her to be strong. "Would you like some time alone?" I asked. "Or would you like help with your bags?" She looked surprised that the choice belonged to her. I waited. My family had returned because they believed the girl abandoned for 9 summers would still do what she had been trained to do: stay quiet, carry the consequences, and save everyone before herself. They had been partly right. I saved the employees who had not built the trap. I saved the lodge where June kept a room for me. I saved the name they had used without permission. But I did not save the people who lit the fire from having to stand before what they burned. For the first time in my life, when the door opened, I was not the one leaving.